This week I felt, a couple weeks, the Lord's been kind of speaking to me for my life personally. And this week it kind of happened that I just felt so strong about it that I needed to share with you because I think it's an important thing in our lives. And there's always new levels of it. So you've heard messages many times before on this subject, but there's always a new level. And that's what's happening in my life right now, just a new level of it. Have you ever watched America's Funny Videos, one of those type of programs, all the crazy things? You wonder what's going on in some of these people's heads when they do that, right? You just wonder. They ride skateboards. Let me advise everyone here, especially our age here, do not ride a skateboard. And do not think you can ride a skateboard and jump up on a rail of something, of a handrail of some sort, and slide down it. And it's just not safe. And I don't know what's, possessing them to think they should try some of these things. The craziest thing. And especially, and you see kids doing it, but then they show somebody my age trying to ride a hoverboard. Have you seen those new hoverboards? I got on one of my grandkids' hoverboard, and I kind of felt like it was sagging a little bit, so we got off, and I found out the weight was to be about 50 pounds less. I exceeded it by 50 pounds, so I didn't break it, luckily. But I see these people get on them, and they start going, and they start turning, and all of a sudden, whoop, 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 and out it goes, and they go down. And what it reminded me is Derwin. Now, what happened to Derwin? Oh, there he is. Don't dance with your grandsons anymore. He thought he was doing that Russian bottle dance or something. Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah. And he broke his ankle so bad he ended up in the hospital for a week and played it and screwed together. So he's back in one piece, but be careful. The question is, what's going on with some of these people? I see what that they're doing. What's going on in their heart and life? I think God asks that question sometimes. What were we thinking? I think a lot of wives have asked their husbands, what were you thinking when you did this? And so, it's more important, though, of what's happening inside you than what's happening outside you. Because what we're going to look at today is what's happening inside us determines a lot of what's going on in the outside. And we got to get that inside right. We want to have the right fruit. Jesus said you got to make the tree right. If you don't have the tree right, you don't have the right fruit. And so all of a sudden when we start having some of this wrong fruit in our life, it tells us something's wrong, if you would, with our tree. And so I want to look at a couple verses, and I want to start in Samuel. And in Samuel, there's a story here where Saul had he disobeyed God, and Samuel was grieved, and God was even grieved that he had made Saul king. And so he tells Samuel, he says, Samuel, I want you to go and anoint the son of Jesse. The problem was he had 7 sons, or 8, so he had all these sons, and so he says, go anoint them. And so Samuel goes, but he says, hey, what if Saul finds out? He'll kill me, that I'm going to anoint somebody else to be king, and he's the king. That's just a king thing, you kind of protect your territory. So he said, well, go ahead and go down and have a sacrifice and then call him over. So he got a hold of Jesse, and he said, bring your sons. I want to anoint them. And this, he did, I don't think he told him what he wanted to do yet. But see, bring your sons in. I want to see him. So this is where we come in verse 6. When they entered, that's Jesse and his sons, he looked at Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. Just imagine, now this is the prophet Samuel. He is a priest. He is the one that God was speaking through and using mightily with the people of God, right? I mean, he is it. He is top guy. And he looks, and human nature and that, he looks and he says, man, this guy looks like a king. I mean, this guy is it. And he's going, wow, this surely has to be God's anointed. This surely has to be the one God wants. So let's look at verse 7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For God sees not as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Now, wow, there we go. There we have it. More important what was happening on the inside than what he was on the outside. The appearance could look great sometimes. And sometimes you look at something and say, this doesn't look right, but it might not look right, but it might be right. Remember, Peter hears that Jesus was going to die, and he says, and Peter jumps in and says, no, God forbid, we're not going to let that happen. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And see, it was important that the appearance looked bad, but it was God's will that Jesus died for our sins, right? So we might see things not quite right, but what's important is what's happening here in this case is on the inside. And so that's what we're talking about today, is what's happening on your inside. What's really happening there. And we look at, let's take a look at the Acts 13:22. After you had removed him, referring to Saul, he raised up David to be their king, concerning whom he also testified, and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my heart, who will do all my will. There you got it. Do you have a heart that's after God's heart? And I think what we're going to look at today, it's going to be something that we definitely will have struggles in, challenges. In other words, we will have to look and examine. And just because the danger sometimes is we get right at church, or we have one of those times with the Lord that we get right, and don't think that lasts forever. It's a day by day, actually even a moment by moment walk. People can make decisions today and get in your car driving home, and you can have somebody cut you off, and you feel mad and shout at them in that, and next thing you know it, you're not feeling right. You know you're out, right? Just takes a second. Just takes a moment. Just takes that neighbor with that problem. It just takes that person that prods you and knows exactly how to irritate you. I think God has gifted me with several of those people that can do that really quick. Yeah. And so, but God is interested in your heart and what's going on. Look at 2 Chronicles 16:9. I just want to just show you some verses on this to see this is what God is looking for. For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. Now this was Asa the king, and he'd acted foolishly, but look at, God is looking. He's looking, and just think of this. He passed by so many, but he found David. And at other times, he passed by everyone. And he says that he was seeking for a man, and he didn't find one. Ezekiel 22:30, I think of that all the time. I sought for a man among them that would make up the hedge, and they would stand in the gap for me for the land, that I would not destroy it. But I found none. What a sad state of affairs of our human nature. Now, the one thing we have in common here is we all have a human nature. We all can be very human. The challenge is that we'll grow to be more spiritual. And the way to do it is not just acting it on the inside. It's that internal struggle of having it right in your heart. It makes me think of the text in Deuteronomy chapter 5:29. Look at this. Oh, that they had such a heart in them, that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it may be well with them and with their sons forever. Just think, God saying, oh, that they had such a heart. After Sunday morning, I always fast through lunchtime. So there's a certain time, if you start trying to talk to me when it's getting closer to noon and that, and I look antsy like I'm trying to leave you, I am. When I see you, I see, dinner. Dinner's waiting. It's calling me very strong. Sometimes we go over here to Panda Express. And, there's different servers. And I always get the rice. They ask you what you want. Instead of just getting the noodles or just getting the rice, I put half rice and half noodles. Do you ever do that? You see that? Yeah. And some people are so good. They just pile it on. It doesn't even, you know what I'm talking about? And I like the ones that pile it on. You know what I'm talking about? And I see some, and there's usually when they get busy, they have to start helping each other in that. And sometimes I'll see kind of watching down the road here, and I see this lady one, and I get the sweet fire chicken, and you like it too, and the teriyaki chicken, yeah, that's my two that I get, entrees. And so I see the one gal doing it sometimes and doesn't put very much, and then this gal, when she goes over, she puts more on, and so I'm kind of hoping. Have you ever done that? I'm hoping I get this one, and because what you're looking for is someone who's going to give you a good plate. And the first thing we look, as we look at this text and we see all these different texts, and we could do more, and I'm resisting going to some other texts right now, but listen, God is looking for someone who has a heart for him. How's your heart? How's your heart? Second thing we look and we learn from some of these things is that what happens on the outside is a direct result of what's happened on the inside. And you could say it a couple different ways, but what's happening on the inside controls what's happening on the outside. See, Asa didn't have a heart for God, and so he acted foolishly. Saul didn't have a heart for God, and so he didn't, and he disobeyed. I think in church it really can be easy to be a Christian. And we probably go out, and I don't know if you're like me, but I do this even in my devotions. I get done sometimes, and I'm ready to rock, I've had just a great time, and I have all the intentions, and then I go out and I see my neighbor. And he has another complaint. One of my dogs, my German Shepherd, went over to say hi to his dog, and he doesn't like it. They haven't gotten in fights, nothing serious, but and it's just a problem. And so we can have good intentions, and we can start here, but we're going to have to get strong. And that's what we're going to talk about some here in a few minutes, of that we have to keep our eyes focused. What's happening on the inside, in your heart, is going to determine and it's going to control your outside. And another thing I think that this tells you, and from the words of Christ, some of the different words, different little text, is that's the real you. That's really who you are. We talked about that a couple weeks ago when the demon asked him, well, I know Jesus and I know who Paul is, but who are you? And so now just the question is, who are you, and how really is your heart? The sad thing on this is I've tried to talk to people sometimes who are really struggling, and it's my job really sometimes, and I call it pastoring and / pestering. And sometimes people, when you talk to them, you're thought of as more of a pester than a pastor. But when you talk to them and about a situation, And I mean, I've had to talk to people who were, in adultery. You have to talk to people who've been drinking or they've gone back to drugs, or we find out they're child molester. And we've had to, I walked that one day, that guy, right here, right 2 minutes before the service, the guy was really a problem, and I walked him off the property. But you become a pester then. And, but they say this: God knows my heart. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's right, he does. And you're in trouble. And like they say down south, you in a heap of trouble, son. Right? Whole bunch. But it seems to be the escape clause that people use sometimes. The scary thing is God knows exactly your heart more than you. Let's look at that text in Jeremiah 17:9. Look at this, what it says. The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? Guys will say of women, you can't understand them. Women will say of men, can't live with them, can't live without them. Right? And yet we can't understand our own heart according to this. Matter of fact, haven't you done something and after you got done and maybe you really blew it big time and you wonder, why did I even do that? I overreacted. Why? Why did I just all of a sudden act like this or say that? I wasn't even thinking it and I just, blasted. Boy, the heart's tricky. It's deceptive. We have to make sure our heart gets in control by God, and put God on the throne of that heart and guard it, because we're in trouble without that. Because, we try to control or grow our children, and we can try to control situations, and then we find, really, we're having problems right here too. So we need to take care of this first. That's why Jesus said, beautiful text, and we won't go into it a lot, but Matthew 7, right? 1 through 5. What does he say there? He says, judge not lest you be judged. Why look at your brother with a speck in his eye when you have a log sticking out of your eye? Right? Just think of that. Here, you thought you were doing good because you saw a speck and wanted to talk to somebody about this little speck, but you have this, sequoia redwood sticking out of your eye. Wow, that's crazy. But we just get it wrong. And we got 20/20 vision when we look at other people, but we kind of shady when we look at ourselves. We give ourselves a pass on this one. And say, oh, I was just hungry. I didn't get my sleep last night. And so, huge subject, so important. And there's some tremendous warnings. This is a warning here in Jeremiah, but there's another one here, and it's in Proverbs chapter 26, 24 and 25. Let's start. Proverbs 26, 24 and 25. Did I not give it? He who hates disguises it with his lips, but he lays up deceit in his heart. When he speaks graciously, do not believe him, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Wow. Now, 7 doesn't mean you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and you're done. That's just a phrase that's saying, you're loaded with abominations. A deceitful heart is really full of it, okay? So I'm going to ask you to help me. And raise your hand now. Just don't shout it out, and I'll call on you. What would be some of the things that get in our heart that can wreak havoc to us spiritually? What are some of the things that can get in our heart that could be one of these abominations? I saw your hand first. Jealousy. Good answer. Pardon me? Lying. Lying tongue. Okay, I didn't hear the last word. Unforgiveness. Lust. What? Criticism, a critical spirit. Hatred. Greed, yes. Okay. Now we're going to have to help. Donnell, you're going to get all the backup support, and Admiral's going to suffer for that. He just got hit in the head by another woman. Free shots after church at Admiral if you want. Okay, thank you, Admiral, for proving my point about our heart. Thank you very much. Okay, anybody else? Anybody? Pride. Bitterness. Anger. Lust. I mean, just think of all these. How about stubbornness? We'll say sometimes, boy, they're as stubborn as grandma, you know. Envy. Good answer. Okay, so there's all these things. So we got the idea here about having all these things that can come and it can be destroying us. Look what Jesus said here in Matthew 13:15, along with this idea of kind of a warning, what it can do to us. It can be very blinding. 13:15. Now I'm kind of taking the middle of the text out here, so there's a little bit of before and after that's important. But for the heart of this people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them. Have you ever been to the point you just don't want to hear anymore? Have you ever not wanted to look at the truth? Because it's pretty hard to face? Come on. That's what it's saying here. And so what he says is your heart has become dull. Show the Greek word real quick. I thought this was an important word to bring out. It's pakuno. It's translated dull because it's translated kind of metaphorically as a likeness in that. But look at thick or fat. Your heart. Have you ever heard the term, oh, he's just thick-headed? Well, that's kind of what we said, and it might be biblically, he's thick-hearted. Right? And so God is just saying here, and Jesus is just saying that the warning here is that we come to the point where we're thick. You know, the Bible says in Ephesians 4:32 we should have a soft heart. We should be soft. And it's easy to become hard, isn't it? I know sometimes that's a sign real quick to me that I'm getting hard. You ever somebody keeps prodding you with this thing, you know, and just over and over, and you just get harder and harder, and you finally just want to hold your ground. You know, you're going to stand firm. You're going to show them whatever you want to call it. Or you're just so upset inside you really don't even care anymore. You know what I mean? You just get, and I get that way. You know, I mean, I don't do it every day, but I had that happen to me very seriously when the city kept lying about us about 2 years ago. And we actually had notes where they sent me notes that we have proof that they'd lied. And I just got so mad, I told the elders one day, I am getting so ticked, I'd just like to go down and clock them. And that wasn't give them a time. It had nothing to do with time. It's a phrase we use for something else. Give them a box of candy. But, I mean, what I'm saying is we all can be human. I'm just letting you know I can be very human in this and get to that point where you don't care anymore. You don't want to hear it. You don't want to see this. You just feel you're at your end on this. And so there's some steps I want to give, and there's very possibly we'll have, we're not going to get very far. I can see you've been listening very slow this morning. And we're out of time in just 5 minutes, so I have 5 minutes to finish here, but we possibly will look at some of this next week. It's just really good stuff, I think. But let's look at some of these verses. Let's start with 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 9. As for you, my son Solomon, I love this. David is commissioning his own son and to be king. Know the God of your father and serve him with a whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands every intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will let you find him. But if you forsake him, he will reject you forever. Wow. We have a problem with the whole heart idea. And it's found several places, and I've skipped a couple verses this morning, but one place is in Acts 8:37 where it says, if you believe with all your heart. We skipped a text in Matthew chapter 22, 36 through 40, which is a very good text. Maybe we'll hit some of these next week more intensely, but is it love God with what? All your heart. With all your heart. We're so divided. And yet God is saying, that needs to be first. And if you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all these things will be added. Some of the very things we're after we'll get if we just put God first. We have to put first things first. And then when you put God first, some of these other things really don't matter as much. So that's the key. And here, one thing we should check and make sure that when we find other things kind of creeping into our heart, that we stop it. We just don't let it go any farther. Let me give you an example. What if you're contemplating adultery? Yeah. What advice would you give this man or this woman that confides in you? You're thinking about it. You're actually thinking about adultery. Well, you're going to have to quit thinking about adultery. You just stop, yeah. But you have to draw the line. And everyone in this room draws the line someplace, right? Everybody does. And everybody in the world, they have this thing, and they kind of draw the line where they draw it. Listen, it's not important where you draw it. It's important where God drew the line. And that's what we got to do. We have to learn where to draw the line. And so when our heart isn't whole and we start to catch that, and we start to feel other things are coming in that are becoming too important to us, we've got to catch it and reprioritize maybe. Proverbs. Let's start in Proverbs. Do a couple verses there and we'll quit. Proverbs 2:2. Make your ear attentive to wisdom. Incline your heart to understanding. Incline your heart to understanding. In other words, the tendency for you is to accept understanding and accept wisdom. Some people reject, they don't listen. As a matter of fact, let me challenge you here or encourage you to read Proverbs. Get out like a Strong's Concordance and go through every place the verse talks about the heart. It's going to take you several days to do it. I mean, you can't just sit down and say, you could do it in a couple hours, but most of you aren't going to want to do that. So you could just start going through it, and you're going to find a lot of these verses tells you your heart needs to learn to listen. Now, when the Bible talks about knowledge, it's talking about facts. When it's talking about understanding, it's talking about the comprehension of facts. And when it's talking about wisdom, it's talking about the application of facts. Okay, you got that? So, here it's saying that your heart needs to be inclined, that you take facts, you put it together, you understand it, you approach wisdom then to use it in your life. Wisdom is the usage, the highest usage of knowledge. Okay, matter of fact, if you study Sophia or Sophos, that's the original language for the words wisdom, and it will tell you that it's the highest level of that comprehension and usage of knowledge. And so that's what we have to do. But the thing is we get sidetracked. And maybe I'll end here. We get sidetracked. So we have to incline our heart to be able to listen. My son, he says in Proverbs chapter 1, if you read Proverbs again, he goes, my son, listen to the words of your father and your mother. He says it several times in Proverbs, but especially that first chapter, you'll see it at the first 10 verses. And it's very important. Listen, and incline. And we have to stay focused there on that. We have to catch ourselves that we've stopped listening. I can tell a lot of times when I approach somebody and talk to them about a difficult subject, you can tell they're not listening. What do they give you? Blank stare. They give you excuses, reasons why they could do it, stuff like that. My dogs. I like having the 10 acres. It's great, and we go out and we have rules with my dogs have rules, And one of them is when they see a car coming up and we're walking, we have 3/4 of a mile of a dirt road to our property, and they'll see a car. They want to visit every car, and I try to get them off to the side, and they can resist that, but barely. Their feet are going like this. They're, everything in their body is saying, "I want to see who's in that car." You know what I'm talking about? If you had a dog and they're doing that, oh man, but there's something else that I have tried and I cannot win this one. When they see a squirrel or a rabbit, they are gone. And I can whistle. That's the come whistle. I can whistle till my whistle's broken. And I can call them. I don't even know where they are sometimes. I just go home by myself. And hour later, they'll show up. But they looked for that squirrel or rabbit sometimes, and they just couldn't get themselves to obey. Now, they obey most of the time, and other things, really good, and they'd say, "Oh man, I'm in all the way. Dave, take me for that walk. Take the leash off me." Not a fat chance when you get down to the park, because you have to have them on a leash, or they'll go after other dogs, squirrels and rabbits there too, and so I can't do it. I have to hold them back. God's having to hold us back sometimes because we see that squirrel. I don't know what the squirrels are in your life, but those things that get you off the very thing of your heart being right and will chase a squirrel. And man, that squirrel is so fun. My dog has never caught a squirrel. Both of them, Never caught a squirrel. I don't think they ever caught a rabbit. But they think they're going to. And they've got these things, and it leads them from obedience, and it takes their heart away from what their real heart is, that they're very loyal, very faithful. But you let a squirrel come into play, and they're gone. So danger. Write down the squirrels in your life, that what they are, and be careful, because you really don't want to fall, right? You don't intentionally do it. You pray about it and you want to have victory in these areas, but then all of a sudden that squirrel shows up. And the funniest thing I think about the rabbits is, you ever watch a cottontail run? That tail, I just laugh at it almost every time we come in at night, and you see that tail going like this. It's waving at you. Hi. It's waving at the coyotes. Come catch me, and the dogs, and they see this little white thing going down the road. And it's the cutest thing to me. I just laugh at it every time. I say, "Mary, look at the tail, look at the tail." It's so funny to me. And I've seen it 1,000 times, but that's what it's going to do to you spiritually. And you're going to say, "Boy, it sure looks fun. That's something I ought to chase." Don't do it. Let's pray.